Hello, I'm Jackie Weaver, and I'm here to say Congleton Radio has the authority.
I'm Stuart Nield, and this is the White Ribbon in their own words on Congleton Radio. Now let me introduce Peter. Peter, you're with the White Ribbon. Can you tell us your position in White Ribbon?
Yeah, I'm the chair of White Ribbon. I'm chair of trustees for the White Ribbon UK.
So, what do you exactly do as the chair of White Ribbon?
Well, as chair in any charity, it's making sure that the charity is operating well, and that that we're achieving our charitable objectives, which is to work with men and boys to try and end male violence against women.
What brought you to White Ribbon?
Pardon?
What brought you to White Ribbon?
Mainly because what brought me to White Ribbon was I played football, and one of my teammates who plays football was the founder of White Ribbon, and he just happened to mention it one day, told me what he did, and said, "That's brilliant. I fully support you." He says, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" So I decided, I said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" So he says, "Well, join our board." And that was 6 or 7 years ago. And so I've been there ever since. But really, pushing forward the White Ribbon agenda as much as I can in every possible way.
Do you think it's been hard getting across the message of White Ribbon?
Well, yes and no. I think every woman in the country knows all about this because they've seen the sort of misogyny, the harassment that they've had to live through. So much so that for many women it's just become a normal part of their lives. But for men, it is often some of the worst parts of it are hidden. They don't see them. Because they're not subject to them. Often the most misogynistic of men and the activities that they perpetrate are done in secret and not something that often other men see. So unless you grow up in a household with a violent father, or that you've got some direct experience, lots of men don't necessarily see it. So that's why it's important. It's important for us on two fronts, really. One is that is about this raising awareness, but also helping men understand that the sort of ideas that are put forward by socialisation when you're growing up and with your mates in the pub, some of those ideas that you might hear from other men are not necessarily the way that you want to be. And so it's trying to get them away from falling into sort of very toxic stereotypes of what it is to be a man. And so I think for us it's a lot of that. But when we do talk to men, a lot of men say, "Well, I'm not violent. I've never been violent to women." But it's about talking to them about all the sort of underpinning attitudes that they may come in contact with and ignore or allow. And as soon as you're allowing other people to be misogynistic, you're giving them the green light to say, "Well, actually, this behaviour is okay." So a lot of the work we do is to get them to think about how some very what might be seen as quite low-level sexism then turns into much more serious harassment and abuse.
It's all about calling out bad behaviour and education at a grassroots level.
Absolutely, and I think and one of the things one of the reasons why I try to explain it and why we're predominantly a male-led organisation is because we get into places. We are in the places where it's all male places. So when I'm standing on a football terrace with my mates, nearly everyone that I stand next to is male, and so if I go to the pub, it's often groups of men, and so we're privy to those sorts of discussions in those spaces, and that's where often a lot of misogyny breeds in those sorts of places. So those are the areas that we try and tackle and have those discussions.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, I found as an ambassador, when it's a Saturday night and men can be in high spirits, as it were, and I've just had a word with them and said, look, this isn't the right way. And I've also pointed out that if they're going along that path, they can be getting themselves in trouble. They might think it's innocent enough, but it's wrong, and they could get themselves in serious trouble.
And I think it's also about getting perspective. I think men are brought up with this idea that what it is to be a real man is to have as many sexual conquests as they can, and that that's what they should be aiming to do on a night out sort of thing. And I think it also, that sort of attitude leads men into never having proper relationships. I've met guys who've never sort of got into a real relationship with a woman because they've always been just looking at it as a conquest, not as a entering into a partnership, a real deep relationship. For me, it's like they're living life at a surface level, and they never go to really fully enjoy life if that's where that's how they think life is. And trying to get them, and often we do say young men because I think it is about when young men are socialising, when some of these things get ingrained as being acceptable, and that's when we get a chance to change those sorts of inbuilt responses to things. So it is about just getting them to think about what it is they're trying to do and who are they trying to impress. One of the things that I used to do a lot when I do a workshop is I'd ask all the men to think of the person that they admire most, the man that they admire most, that they know personally, not a hero out of a movie, but someone who they really know, who's the person that they respect the most, and then write down 3 words that describe them. And so we do all sorts of other things, but then when I get them to look at what words people come up with all the time, it's always things like caring, being thoughtful, helping other people. But when you talk to men about, what do they think masculinity is, it's always about being tough and being about, and the sorts of attitudes that underpin misogyny. But in reality, all those sorts of traits like being caring and thoughtful and supportive, these are all traits that we all instinctively know that these are the things that we respect from other people. But when we try and intellectualize them as young men, we always tend to think of the world in black and white and very much like see us as a hero in some western where the man's got to do what a man's got to do and lead everything with the fists. I'm probably a bit... Go on.
I totally understand that. I think how you put it across is really well. But what impact do you think the White Ribbon UK has had in the UK?
Certainly, I often have this discussion where I say, well, one of our aims is to end male violence against women. And I often say to other people, well, I don't think that's ever going to happen. It might be our aim, but I can't see how that's, we're never going to eradicate it completely. But what we can do is we can get more and more people to understand and to realise this. And look, women know all about this, and they've been fighting against male violence against women for eons. But the problem is, until men take this as a serious issue, it's never going to get anywhere. Well, I'm not saying never going to get anywhere. We're not going to make a serious dent unless the people that are doing the perpetrating are actually called out by their peers. And one of the problems with perpetrators of misogyny is that they don't listen to women. So it doesn't matter what women are saying about that men should stop this. They don't listen to them. So having other men to say, "Hang on a minute, that's just not on," is one of the ways that I believe we can get men to stop and think about what it is that they're doing.
Now, if there's a female that's listening at this point in time, and she's the victim of male violence or male bullying in the home, what do you think she should do? Who should she get in contact with?
Well, if she goes onto our website, we have a page of support, and there's lots of support for women. What we try and do as ambassadors is have some cards with support numbers, because there are loads of organisations out there specifically to help women, such as Women's Aid and Rape Crisis. The whole plethora of them. If they go onto our website, White Ribbon UK, they'll see that there's lots of support for them there by other organisations. Our organisation is very much about trying to talk to men and get men to behave differently. We do have. I think the other thing to remember is that although it's an organisation really aimed at changing men's behaviour, it's not just men who do this work for us. We have ambassadors who are men who go into those sort of very male spaces and have those discussions. But we also have lots of women champions who are there to help spread this message and get more and more people involved. I think this space has been, in terms of organisations that are fighting against this, there are lots in Britain, but most of those organisations are there helping women who are the victims of evil men. What we're trying to do is to try and stem the violence as a preventative measure, as to trying to encourage men not to do it. Right? I'd rather all the support organisations like Rape Crisis didn't exist because there was nothing for them to exist for. Unfortunately, that's not the case, because men continue to be violent and abusive to women, and every year we get more and more horrific tales. 2 women die every week in Britain from their partners or ex-partners. That's a shocking statistic. 2 women a week. It's something which, because it's there all the time, drip, drip, drip. If all those women were all killed in one day, it'd be described as a massacre. But this massacre does happen, and it happens every year in the UK.
Now, if somebody wants to donate to White Ribbon to keep your work going, where or how can they do that?
Well, I'd say everyone with any interest in White Ribbon go to our website, whiteribbon.org, and you will see that we've got resources aimed at schools and organisations to see how they can help move the case forward. There is they can donate directly via our website, and if they would like to spread the word, they can become an ambassador or a champion for us. And how to do that is on our website. We have training for people so that they can help spread the word.
Well, thanks for joining us today, Peter. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councillor Rob Morton, you're a councillor for Congleton Town and Cheshire East. What are your thoughts on the White Ribbon movement?
An absolutely fantastic initiative, something I fully support. Nobody should suffer harm or violence or physical violence in any shape or form.
I think anybody would agree with that.
Yeah, I don't think it's not just physical violence in my view. People shouldn't forget mental abuse and bullying as well. That can be just as destructive, and it also destroys lives. I've witnessed it,
and it destroys all the family member lives. I mean, if you've got a male that's being violent or controlling to his wife, it affects the lives of the children and everybody in that family unit.
It's they say it massively must affect children's lives, the school work and everything, and potentially destroys careers. It's totally destructive.
So you believe in the White Ribbon movement and other movements like it?
I totally believe in the White Ribbon movement. I don't think we can forget men being abused by ladies and women either. There's loads of groups out there, and there's a lot of men that feel it's weak to come forward. I mean, my message to them is don't suffer in silence. There's plenty of people out there to help you, and get the help you require.
And that's the thing, like you say, with men or females, just get the help that you require. Speak out. Talk to somebody. Get that help.
Definitely. Don't suffer in silence. And don't let these bullies ruin your family's your lives, your family's lives. Go get the help you need and talk to these people, because there is a way out and there's always a way forward.
Well, thanks a lot, Rob. Much appreciated.
No problem. Thank you for contacting me.
Councillor Paul Duffy, how are you?
I'm fine, sir. I'm fine. How are you doing today?
I'm not so bad. Now, you've been involved with White Ribbon for a while, haven't you? You've been a big supporter of it.
Yes. So when I became a councillor in 2019, it was one of the first groups that we got involved with when we joined a new council. It was brought to us by Councillor Wesley and Richard Walton. I think originally it was Richard Walton sent emails out talking about White Ribbon and what it was about. And it instantly appealed to me as a kind of, an organisation you could support. There was this, it was explained to us about being a White Ribbon ambassador, White Ribbon town. And when we got a presentation around, like other organisations like the police and the fire service were big supporters. It felt like more than just like a pressure group, as it were, and more of a sort of, proper organised charity to talk about domestic violence. And where, like the angle of where, masculine behaviour around, approach to women was challenged. So it was men challenging men around, a kind of, like, well, that's not right. We shouldn't be doing that. You shouldn't say that. And I thought that was a good way of, it wasn't just like a domestic violence charity where you're dealing with the after effects. It was more of a preemptive approach where, like, you can spot behaviours where you think, actually, that's, you don't want to talk like that. You don't want to suggest that. You don't want to act out like that. And it was men challenging, other guys to say, hold on a minute, let's not do that. And that's what was a big appeal.
Now, what you've said is exactly how I see it as a fellow White Ribbon ambassador, where, if you're with a circle of friends and one friend might say something jokingly, you can turn around and say, you're not being patronising, but you're just pointing them in a direction where if you do say that, you might get in trouble and it could be perceived as this and that, and you want to keep away from that.
Exactly. And it's that idea. It's almost, and this is, we're doing a bit of guy chat now, where it's like, where does the banter stop and where does it become, like a potential problem? And it's, and it's that challenging aspect. We've seen the things, older generations are, more set in their ways, etc. And so, we can still challenge that aspect. But I know that the White Ribbon is getting involved a lot with high schools and, like that sort of junior category, sports clubs and high schools, etc. And that's really where, that's really, trying to stop it from happening in the first place is education early on. And that's, that's where it's really good, where, guys are getting in talking to, boys and young men, young adults who are, full of testosterone, they're starting out in life, etc. And, I'm sure what some of the stuff they see on the internet is just, gives them, like a green light to behave in certain ways.
Yeah.
And it's trying to challenge that.
It's all about doing it at grassroots level.
Definitely. And there's always been, unfortunately, there's always been domestic violence. In my day, when I was growing up, it was very simple. There was a very simple and direct message where it was just like, don't ever hit a woman. Just never hit a woman. And that was your whole sort of White Ribbon, whole, chat about domestic violence. That whole thing was just around a straightforward, I remember my dad, your mate saying, you can't hit a woman, just don't hit a woman.
Yeah.
And that was it. It was a kind of full stop. And that's what I grew up with. And, that was right. I never hit a woman and that's it. But it's a bit more, that doesn't then mean that domestic violence doesn't exist. We're coming up to Christmas. We've got the World Cup. All the stats are there for, these periods of time. I mean, actually, weirdly, the World Cup and Christmas together is from that sort of thing. From a domestic violence point of view, is probably a bit of a stars aligning in this way. But for to move that message, to not just say you can't hurt women, but to actually go further back to a bit of a root cause and say challenge it at the grassroots, as you say, is definitely what White Ribbon's about, and why I could fully support it.
I mean, you could say that when it comes to things like football and Christmas, there's going to be drink involved, and also when it's things like Christmas, pressure. And I think domestic violence, it's a sign of weakness.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I think you've hit the key buzzword for me, which is there's a pressure, and what causes that pressure? Are you actually going to get violent, shouting, aggressive because your football team's lost because you've got a drink in you, and very much, there's a lot of alcohol-related stuff. I don't know the facts and figures, but there's no, I'm sure there's someone who'll say plenty of women get hit without alcohol, and that will be true. But it's that sort of aggressive, overly aggressive, like the pressure, testosterone, all these factors that combine to make somebody go pop and take it out on their other half or partner, or I'm sure there's mums, sisters, all that sort of stuff. It's trying to get into the sort of the psyche of just making it unacceptable and stop it getting out of control. So if you have a young man and he's derogatory to women, saying showing photographs on his phone, or it's the old wolf whistling, although I don't think that exists as much as it did when I was growing up, but just derogatory to women. If you're challenging that, and the more people that challenge it and it becomes socially unacceptable, then it'll help. It won't eliminate, but it'll certainly help and reduce the numbers. And I think that's probably where White Ribbon comes from.
Well, that's lovely to hear. Thanks for talking to us today, Paul. Much appreciated.
Sure, no problem. Yeah, no problem. Enjoyed our chats as always.
And carry on the good work with White Ribbon.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's 25th of November, so it's next week for White Ribbon Day. We're recording this on from a week before.
Yeah.
But White Ribbon Day is on 25th.
And that's when this will be going out.
Yeah, excellent.
And we've got Councillor David Brown with us. You all right, David?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Good to hear. You've been a supporter of White Ribbon, I believe.
Yeah. I've been on the stall in the town, having the leaflets out, having discussions, yeah. Yeah, it's, the council adopted it 18 months, 2 years ago now. We've got quite a few ambassadors established in town, so it's going really well. I mean, the way we implemented it in Congleton was for anybody who's suffering any domestic abuse, not just females, but males as well. So there are two associations with that. One's White Ribbon, which is primarily focused on domestic abuse to women, and Mankind, which is domestic abuse to men, because there's a surprisingly large amount of abuse to men, which I must admit, until I got involved, I didn't realise that would be the case, that it was such a high percentage. But it's like 1 in 5, 1 in 6 in the ratio of domestic abuse.
Do you think Congleton is leading the way, not just with White Ribbon, but with equality across all things with domestic violence? Yeah,
well, we've all seen big pushes on the equality front, haven't we, over the last 10 years. It's been a remarkable change. I know sometimes I think, well, what's happened to the white heterosexual male? We're getting left behind in all these equality things. But it's good that we're now getting a society where hopefully everybody's treated with equal respect and with fairness, both professionally and socially. I think it's vitally important that we have a totally inclusive society, because that's what makes the world go round. So, the recent changes over the last 10 years, I think with Pride coming to the fore, Black Lives Matter, and issues are made of it. You certainly wouldn't like to be in a position like it is in Qatar at the moment, with the divisiveness they've got there and the inequality that there is. So, I think Congleton's a very fair town, and I see very little disrespect between different people, be that men, women, or race, or creed, or whatever, or religion. It's people are allowed to get on and do what they believe is right for them, and people all muddle in and get along.
And I think Congleton is one of those towns where even the councillors, when they're on different parties, whether they be Conservative, Lib Dems, Independent, whatever, they all have respect for each other in Congleton.
Yeah, I think, well, obviously, I suppose some of us do get on a high horse at times where it's something you feel passionate about. It's only like me with being on the In Bloom team for nearly 20 years, and I've been running it for 10 years. It's something that you're very, very passionate about. So sometimes you have to calm yourself down because not everybody sees it quite as important as me. But I think actually well-being and making people feel good, and it's being kept clean is part of that, and very good for mental health for everybody. So I think you just got to respect individuals' views on certain things, and it's just as well we're not all the same, isn't it? I think it'd be a real boring world if everybody was the same.
It would.
So yeah, what would you talk about when you go out socially if you haven't got slightly different opinions? But I think all in all, I mean, Congleton is just a fantastic place to live. I think the beauty to me of the people in Congleton is if you go through a list of all the charities we've got in town, and I don't mean national charities, ones that have been started here, like Vision, when that was started off, like Ruby's Fund, when that was started off, and people have just kept them going. And, I think Vision's been going, I think that was formed just after I got on the council in 2001, something like that. It's been going for a long time. And I remember Ruby's Fund. I remember Ruby's mum coming and knocking on my front door saying, "Can you give me any help with how we start this off?"
Yeah. And
we managed to find a sponsor for her. And, over 10 years, it's gone from the front room at a house into what it is now, which is a fantastic facility for children with any form of disability and children who are able-bodied as well. So it's totally inclusive. And, going back to the point that you made about it being equal for everybody, I think it is in Congleton. And that's made up of a lot of people who, the majority of which, do it for nothing, basically.
I mean, I know for a fact that you were instrumental in Ruby's Fund, and like you said, you played a big part in bringing White Ribbon to Congleton. Yeah, well, it was a council initiative, and the two councillors who are incredibly passionate about it, who started it off. Robert Emsley, whose dad, interestingly enough, was a former county councillor and a Liberal councillor in Congleton. He lived about 5 doors away from me, so I know him particularly well. So I know that family, and him and Susie Ferkey and Kay Wesley, they all got together and put the presentation together. I must admit I was a little bit sceptical at the beginning because I felt it was unequal, for want of a better word, because White Ribbon focuses so much on domestic abuse to women. But when we implemented it in Congleton, we took a decision that we'd include men as well, and hence, when they have exhibitions, there's normally Mankind brooches as well as White Ribbon brooches there, so that's fantastic. Well, that's brilliant, David. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
No, it's always a pleasure, you know that, so long as I've got something sensible to say, and I'm sure you'll stop ringing when I run out of things that are any good.
Thanks a lot.
Lovely to speak to you. Yeah, see you again. Bye.
Now we've got Councillor Kay Wesley with us. Now, Kay, White Ribbon is very important to you, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is, Stuart. I think it's one of the things that the council and Congleton has achieved over the last few years, and it's made a big difference to victims of domestic abuse and sexual violence in Congleton.
Now, when did you first get into White Ribbon?
Well, we had a presentation in Congleton from Professor Chris Green, who was the president of White Ribbon UK, and a few of us went along and learned about the White Ribbon campaign and the fact that it's really about mobilising men to stand up against violence, and that seemed to me to be a very good idea. because there are lots of women's groups campaigning to end violence against women and girls. But it seems to me that the only people who can really end this are men. And most men, of course, are not violent at all. So it seems really important to me that men stand up as allies and speak out against violence and sort of toxic masculinity and those behaviours.
Do you think the White Ribbon movement has made a difference in the UK and worldwide?
Yes, certainly it has. I think it's had a huge impact because it's kind of changed the narrative. I think around violence against women and girls, there was a lot of victim blaming. It was, you shouldn't have been wearing that dress. You shouldn't have been out late at night. Why don't you leave your abusive partner? All that sort of thing. And I think White Ribbon has really changed that story and said, well, actually, do you know what? Men shouldn't hurt women. and what can we men and what can other men and other women do to sort of change the culture so that doesn't happen? Because, it's not only women, of course. Toxic masculinity hurts other people too. It hurts LGBT people. It hurts other men. 95% of murders are committed. It's a fantastic way of sort of changing the story and saying, actually, being a real man is about being kind and respectful and supporting, other humans. And I think in Congleton and nationally, we've seen that impact.
I think it's all about changing the culture of victim blaming as well. Like you say, it's
absolutely,
a female should be able to wear whatever she liked.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, we've had people come up to us in Congleton and say, thank you for this, thank you for changing, what people say about these issues, and thank you for bringing this out into the open. Because, in Congleton, Stuart, there's an incident of domestic abuse reported to the police every day on average, and there's an incident of sexual violence once a week. That's huge.
Yeah.
If there's an incident of violence in the middle of the town centre every day, people would be up in arms saying, this is terrible. There's so much violence in our town. But because it's behind closed doors, we almost have forgotten about it, I think, in the past. So I think now the White Ribbon campaign and the work we've been doing has helped bring it out in the open and say, no, you shouldn't be subjected to violence and abuse in your house any more than you should in the streets. And just because it happens in private doesn't mean that it's okay. So it's really given people the courage to speak up. And we have seen some real tangible impacts in Congleton. One of them has been the police tell us, although the number of reports has stayed the same year on year, the number of arrests has actually doubled in the last 12 months. And the reason for that, they say, is that victims are more confident now to say, yes, I want to pursue this, I want to go forward, and because of the narrative saying, it's not your fault, this should be dealt with properly, the police tell us that has changed the success rate in, bringing these people to arrest. Another thing that we've seen is we have a domestic abuse clinic in Congleton, which has been implemented in the last 2 years by My Cheshire Without Abuse. And at the clinic, what we've seen is, in the last couple of years, we've seen men coming to the clinic to say, look, I'm worried about my own behaviour. I'm worried that I might be becoming abusive. And I think that's quite interesting as well. Because, of course, the solution is not just to lock up all the men who might become abusive. And the solution isn't always jail. The solution can be, just better behaviours, better family relationships. And you can get to that with, perpetrator programs and counselling and so on. So I think we've seen, some really positive results in Congleton.
It's about getting to the root of the problem.
Exactly. Because, in these sort of old days, we sort of maybe removed, the perpetrator, split up the family, put better locks on the doors, and all of that stuff can be really important still. But the reality is that perpetrators potentially just move on to another family and the cycle starts again. So, as you say, the root of the problem is really for other men and women to say, actually, do you know what? This is not okay. This behaviour needs to stop. If you're perpetrating these behaviours, you need to get help with your behaviour and you need to change. So I think it's really about everyone, neighbours, family, friends, having the courage to say, you know what you're doing there, that's not okay. why don't you sort of try and get some help with your behaviour, because it's really not okay. And we have seen that happening. As I say, we've had people coming up to us saying, because of the White Ribbon campaign, I did this, I spoke to my brother, I spoke to my friend, I helped this family or that family. So we've really seen not only these statistics I mentioned, but we've seen on an individual level people who've been impacted, which is great.
Well, thanks for joining us today, Kay. It really is appreciated.
Thank you for having me, and happy White Ribbon Day on the 25th of November.
Now we've got the Reverend Murray George with us. How are you, Murray? You okay?
I'm very well, thanks, Stuart. Very well indeed.
Now, you held a special service for White Ribbon the other day, didn't you?
Yes, we did on Sunday, and Councillor Kay Wesley and her husband, one of the ambassadors for White Ribbon, came along to it. It was a good service. Difficult to do, obviously, because we heard from survivors, but it was a very good service and a necessary service to do.
So did you get lots of feedback about the service?
We haven't had a huge amount of feedback, but we have had some. What feedback we have had is very positive, and there are signs that it's had an impact, which is always good. So I was pleased with it.
Well, it's things like this, even a church service, that can get people talking and thinking and spreading the word that certain people need to change their behaviour.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say certain people, Stuart. I think that the thing with the White Ribbon movement is that it challenges particularly men, but all men really, to look at their behaviour, to assess their behaviour and question their behaviour. I think that is a vital first step, because I think there are always occasions where we could do better, where we could care better, when we could think of the other person more than we do. And in doing that, be aware of what behaviour we have. Quite often, I think, things happen without us thinking or reflecting about it and realising then what impact it has on other people. I mean, I am always saddened, but unfortunately not amazed when I'm walking down the street, particularly at dusk or dawn, and there's not a huge number of people around, and a woman will cross over the road to walk on the opposite pavement. It's sometimes difficult to think what to do and how to, but the more we do that, and the more we talk, particularly as men, about how we act and react, I think the better it will be. So I think it's something for all men to do in particular. And I know that there's a whole variety of gender-based violence around, but I think the history and the present activity of men's responses and treatment of women, we need to all think about it. And I think it's a particularly apposite time to do that in the world, the World Cup that's going on now, and Christmas holidays, because these are all times when there is unfortunately an increase in adverse and abusive, violent behaviour. And we need, as a society, as all men, to do something about it.
I mean, something that you've touched on there, and it does ring a bell with me, it's like, if you've got two children, one's a male and one's a female. I know this with my own children, and the eldest daughter would always say, you don't seem to worry about. Not that I wasn't worried about him, but like a brother as much. Yeah. One he was, and I used to say, well, one, he's a couple of years older than you, and two, he's male. And I used to say this years ago. He's in his 30s now, and she's approaching 30. But even back then, I had that type of attitude. Well, yes, he's got more leeway to be out when it's dark. And I'm not talking about like they were young kids. I'm talking as teenagers. 16, 17 and 18. And I'd be more like, well, yeah, that's okay because, he's male and,
but we need to get
naturally,
to it.
And I know we like to promote equality, but naturally, men are stronger than women.
I don't think that should. Yeah, but at the same time, Stuart, I think that's one of the challenges. We need to get to a point as a society, as a world, where anyone can walk around and as they wish to. I've lived in a number of areas in my life. One of them was Hebden Bridge, and I would regularly see, and to the extent that it was not noticeable, women walking on their own. I quite often walk around with the dog and see women walking the dog. And that's exactly as it should be. Everyone should feel free and safe to walk outside whenever they wish to or feel the need to. Everyone should be able to act in the home and feel safe in the home. But unfortunately, it's predominantly, and I use that word advisedly, predominantly women that do not. And we need to face up to that. It doesn't matter if one person is stronger than the other. That should be an irrelevance. It's the way we treat people and care for people and think about the other that is important.
That's completely true. And I concur with everything that you've said there. Do you think it's certain areas, though, as well? Or do you think it's blanket?
No. I think wherever you are, there is the threat and the actualization of domestic abuse, physical abuse. Doesn't matter. It happens just as much behind gated communities and huge detached gated houses as it does in rows of socially deprived housing and things like that. It's throughout society, and that's the problem. That's the challenge as well, to see it as and be looking out for it. It's not just about our own behaviour, but if we think that someone is not themselves, not acting the way they used to, not as bright and bubbly as themselves, doesn't always have to be that we're seeing bruises on people, but the behaviour has changed. The dynamics between a couple have changed. Can be all sorts of reasons for that, I think. But, that's where people ought to question and just say, are you okay? Is there anything I can do? Here is here are some phone numbers, just in case. And we need to be open to listening and hearing the silent ones, the ones who have suddenly gone silent, or over a period of time, we're losing touch with them because, they're always doing something with their partner and never with their friends. There's all sorts of different, things and clues, symptoms that we should be looking out for.
And also things like that could signal it might not be anything with domestic violence. It could be a sign of depression. So that's it.
Yeah.
We're going on a tangent there. But like you say, nobody knows what happens behind closed doors and curtains. And it doesn't matter how somebody, you only have, I mean, you're a man of the cloth. You'll know how many clergymen over the year have been pulled up and been done for things. And they've got away with it because they've hid behind that. It could be anyone. It could be anyone where they're in a high position and people use those positions. Yeah.
In every institution, every institution itself can be abused by abusers. Every home, we don't like to think about it, but predominantly violence goes on from people we know, work colleagues, partners, family members. We need to be aware and we need to be less afraid to ask sensitive but sensible questions.
We need to be more caring.
Yeah, to everybody.
Yeah, we need to be more aware and more caring.
Yeah, this is this is what Jesus did. He went to people, and he could always be approached by anybody, women, men. At a time when women and children just did not count. He talked to them. He, listened to them. He cared about everybody.
And I think that's how it should be. And I think that is what White Ribbon is on about.
Yeah, so do I. And that's why I wear my white ribbon with sadness, but with pride.
Well, thanks a lot.
I'm just sad that we need white ribbon. Yeah. But while we need white ribbon, I will stand up for it.
Well, thanks for talking to us today, Bobby. We really do appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot, Stuart.
Lib Dem councillor Robert Douglas, you've been one of the major backers behind White Ribbon in Congleton. How are you?
Yeah, very well indeed. Thank you, Stuart. And of course, we're coming up to White Ribbon Day this weekend. And this is an annual event. And obviously, what we're trying to get the message across is that we do not condone any type of violence against women, and that we mustn't be silent and stand back when we see something dreadful happening to women. And we have to face the situation that, unfortunately, 9 out of 10 people who suffer abuse are women. And some of the statistics are quite shocking. 99.3% of women have been subjected to sexual harassment or sexual violence. And 95% of serious domestic violence has a male perpetrator and a female victim. In Congleton, we have 1 incident of domestic abuse reported to the police every day, and we have on average 1 incident of sexual violence reported every week. But this isn't just unique to Congleton, this is a national problem. And it was understood that about 2 people commit suicide as a result of domestic abuse every week. But there's been a recent case whereby it was revealed by the decision of the court that a lady who committed suicide, Jessica Laverack, was as a result of domestic abuse, making her life so miserable that she felt she had no other option, sadly. And it's now been thought that we could be having the dreadful situation of up to 10 or even more suicides a week, which the figures are truly shocking. And one has to do what one can to show, to make women feel comfortable within their own space. And even just doing a small thing. For instance, when it's dark, I mean, like when I finished council meeting tonight, when it's dark, I had a similar situation about a year ago. I came out of the town hall, a young lady walked past, and I then walked on the road, giving her a very wide space to make her feel comfortable. Now, no doubt she was thinking I was trying to avoid catching COVID, but in fact, I was trying to give her plenty of space. And that is what we must do, is to make women feel safe in their when they're out in the streets and when they're in their home. And that is what the White Ribbon organisation is about.
Like you say, outside, you can act. It's about being a gentleman. You've acted as a gentleman there. You've thought about others. But it's also trying to educate people in their own homes what goes on behind closed curtains. And when it comes to domestic abuse, and we've mentioned this before, people will turn around and they'll think, oh, it could be, that's what happens on council estates. Yes, things like that do happen. But it can also happen with, as we pointed out, it could be someone that's a vicar, that his wife is the victim of domestic abuse, or it could be someone else in a high position.
Oh, there's no doubt. It involves all sectors of society. There's no section which is different to any other, I'm afraid. And of course, the way to try to reduce the problem in the home is through education at a young age. And Congleton White Ribbon ambassadors have been going into local schools, and they've had excellent feedback, and have been school boys who have picked up the White Ribbon baton, and they have been seen walking with White Ribbon Ambassador lapels, which shows that they're taking it seriously. And by then, with them taking it on seriously, they pass the message on to others. And it is education, whereby we start to instill, what is the right acceptable behaviour, and bullying or catcalling or anything to make a lady feel uncomfortable is just not acceptable. And I should mention that there is actually an organisation as well for men who suffer abuse as well. But the reason why White Ribbon concentrates on women is because 9 out of 10 incidents are women being abused by men.
Well, thanks for talking to us today, Robert. We appreciate it.
Not at all, Stuart, no. And thanks for giving the opportunity as we come to this White Ribbon anniversary to say a few words about this great organisation. And I would encourage anyone to look into the organisation on the website and become, if they're a man, a White Ribbon ambassador, or a lady, a White Ribbon champion. And thanks for giving me the chance to speak today.
Now we've got Susan Munro of the Elizabeth Group with us. How are you, Susan?
I'm very well, thank you, Stuart. How are you?
Not so bad. Now, White Ribbon means a lot to you, doesn't it?
It does indeed, yes. It's something very close to my heart. I think it's a very sad state of affairs that, male violence against women is on the increase. We should be decreasing by now, but sadly, it's still increasing.
So
1 in 4 women, I believe, yes.
Yes, I mean, those statistics, they're horrific, aren't they?
They are. They're not getting any better at all, and it does concern me, particularly younger men and younger boys, just don't seem to be getting the education about it that they need. I think that's where we need to go, because you can, you can work better with younger people than you can with older people, where it's more ingrained.
Now, you were one of the main forces behind the Elizabeth Elmy statue in Congleton, and you've studied Elizabeth's life. What do you think Elizabeth would make of White Ribbon?
Oh, well, she would think White Ribbon was fantastic. One of the things that Elizabeth fought against was male violence towards women and women's right to autonomy over their own bodies. She fought a very, very famous case called the Clitheroe case, which was actually against marital rape, which was something that was accepted by society as the norm at the time, it said in the law that it wasn't possible for a man to rape his wife because he actually owned her. So there was no saying no for a woman in Elizabeth's days, and she fought a very famous case and won it in Clitheroe. And so she would be behind white ribbon 100%. It would be what Elizabeth would want to see happening. But I think it's just very, very sad that it's 150 years on and we're still not moved on very much from that point of view.
So it is, I mean, it's quite tragic. I mean, how many deaths has there been?
Well, exactly. And the thing about the deaths is there are actually on average, 3 femicides a year in this country. And people don't realise what femicide is. Femicide is a woman being murdered because she is a woman. There's no male equivalent. We don't get that. Femicide is a woman being murdered because she is a woman.
Do you think White Ribbon is doing a good enough job? Or do you think it's fighting against the tide?
I think we're fighting against the tide, but I think it's something that has to be fought. Like I was saying, it's 150 years since Elizabeth, and we've still not really moved on very much from the point of view that society had in those days. It's just incredible, really, but we've got to keep at it. We've got to stick at it. We've got to make this happen because otherwise we're not going to change society at all, are we?
It sounds to me like White Ribbon, and I'm proud to be an ambassador of it.
Absolutely.
Is just the start.
Yes,
Everything
I agree.
Has to start
I agree.
Somewhere.
It does. It does. It has to start. And just like Elizabeth had to fight for the vote and for women's rights, that's what we've got today with this massive, massive problem. And it is a massive problem. And it feels for me, the age I am, it feels like we've fought lots of battles through my life, we've got abortion rights, we've done all that fighting for women, but we've still not even dented this. This is still there, and it's still a problem, and in some ways it's taking us backwards. Well,
thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for allowing me to say something on a very, very serious topic. Thank you.
Thanks.
And good luck with White Ribbon. And thank you so much for being an ambassador. Thank you, Stuart.
Thanks a lot. I hope on listening to this programme, you will take something away from it. I hope it will make you think. And maybe you can pass the message on to make others think. I'm Stuart Neild, your White Ribbon ambassador on Congleton Radio.